All right, so we are live. How we doing tonight, Dan?
Doing excellent. How are you?
Good, good. So tonight we're doing another call-in show. So if people want to start getting in line for that to come on. Hold on.
I just got the notification that you went live.
Is that the? Do you hear the echo?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I think it went away. All right, that was weird. Yeah. So we're going to be doing a call-in show tonight, which means that if anyone wants to come on, we have one person waiting now. You can click the link in the description, or if a mod, not sure if Mason is there, but I can put it in the chat as well. Nope, that's not it. I will put it in the chat as well here.
You can get it in the chat too.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both put it. So the question we're going to talk about tonight is this idea or this concept that of like, is cardboard in general in some sort of super bubble, or are trading cards and cards in general going to be something that is a lot more popular for our generation and younger generations going forward, and are the next 20 to 30 years, let's say, or even 10 years, gonna be big for cards? And the reason I titled it like the fine art thing is that's something I've heard Gary Vee and other people say, that our generation isn't gonna like the collectors in our generation are not gonna want art on their walls, are not gonna want ceramics, are not gonna want other physical items. At least fine, or historically what's considered fine art, they're going to want pop culture art like Dan on his walls, which may include our cardboard, our cards. So I think Dan and I are going to start by sharing our opinion on this, and then we're going to bring people on. We're not going to share too much. We're just going to kind of keep it short. So I'm going to let you lead us off, Dan, and start us off with kind of where you're at on this subject. I think it's really the big question, actually. Of course, a lot of the time, many of us are thinking about, when we think about market stuff, we're thinking about, okay, which card is going to do better? Which area in the hobby is going to do better? Is it Pokemon going to do better than Marvel, than Star Wars, than MetaZoo? And like, which thing is going to do better? Where a lot of the actual answer to a lot of this stuff, or the big question, or kind of the most important thing, might be the question that we really talk about tonight, which is sort of the broader, is this some sort of massive super bubble that all of these companies are falling for or are engaged in, or is this just sort of the start of something that's going to kind of continue to grow or be here for a while? So Dan, let's hear what you think.
I know people love fence sitting, so I think both could be true to an extent.
Okay.
I think I've said it many times, and I think I'll say it a bunch tonight, but 99% of grading, the value attributed to the graded card, and getting into, I think we're going to go beyond cardboard a little bit, the whole VHS thing, the whole staying in cardboard, V-Friends, things like that. I don't know what the time frame will be. You never know when a bubble might pop. We had a bit of one in 2020 with Pokemon that popped, and largely prices are down. It's a very broad, diverse market. Certain things are up, certain things never fell. Largely, though, a vast majority, 90+% of the Pokemon hobby fell anywhere between 20 and 80 to 90%. And I think some of it still has a ways to fall. And that's just, there's a lot to get at here. So I might be a bit all over the place, but yeah, I think.
First, I'm going to ask you to focus on, I want to just ask you one question. So just going back to the question for today, where, if you don't want to say we're in a super bubble or this or that, where do you put yourself to start? And then we can kind of backtrack from that and kind of, you can give, the nuanced reason. So like, are we at 70th percentile? You know what I mean? pick where you're at on this scale. And I will too.
I'm heavily leaning towards super bubble.
Okay. So where would you put yourself? 1 to 10, 10 being super bubble, 1 being fine art completely. Where would you put yourself 1 to 10? And then I think that'll be a good way. And I'm going to ask every person who comes on. So
1 to 10, 1 being fine art, 10 being super bubble. Yeah. I'm a solid 8.
Okay.
I would say. And I think it's largely fueled by grading. I think at its core, grading is very useful and necessary to the trade. I do this full time. The original idea, the original intent of a grading company was to provide a third party unbiased opinion on the condition of a card. And I think what it's been warped into, what it has become, is just super stonking bubble mania on. I mean, there are examples where cards are worth 200, 300x what they would otherwise be worth raw because they have 4 10s on the label or because the label's black. I know because I've sold dozens of examples. And that kind of stuff scares me. And it's not just the perfect 10s from CGC or the black label 10s from BGS, but it's 10s across the board. Even PSA 10s in many cases. I think it again, what started as a third party unbiased opinion so that, hey, I'm selling a mint plus card. It's a PSA 9, PSA 10, whatever. Okay, we can agree on it. This guy PSA said it was. Now it's turned into 10 out of 10 is literally a perfect card. Let's pay 5, 10, 100 times the raw card value, raw mint card value. And I don't know if 30 years ago when PSA started, it was necessarily their original intent, but I think that grading companies and auction companies and any business with their fingers in the pot are just riding the wave, going with it, because why wouldn't you? At its core, though, I think cardboard I love it. It's amazing. I think it's an industry and a hobby that can continue to exist long in the future. But I think this grading mania at some point may be looked at upon in hindsight as absolute absurdity in 99% of cases. Literal cases, like literal slabs. 99% of slabs will be, why were those transacting for those prices when they were?
So you're arguing something like that because of grading, because here's what you're not actually saying this, but here's to me what the argument would be, that grading allowed a mass-produced, created scarcity or rarity in a market that didn't really have much. And because it's artificial, it's fake, it's not real. So a 10, a better, first of all, a really perfect looking card versus a less perfect looking card shouldn't have the premium that it does. 1. And 2, they're not even doing a good job of accurately achieving that at the grading card companies, in the sense that they're grading some things that are absolutely perfect 9s and some things that are absolutely not great 10s, these types of things. And the general patterns around that is not just causing a mania in graded cards, but it's also causing a mania in raw cards, because raw cards are being priced higher than they would be because of grading, or some sort of argument like that. Like, it's causing a whole thing.
We can get deeper into it too, but I think the serialized trend that dug sports out of the junk wax era, I don't know what the flashy terminology will be. I like the cardboard super bubble though, which we've got in the title, but I don't know what the flashy term will be 5, 10, maybe 50 years from now. I mean, there's that saying, the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. I think that's relevant to this. No idea what the timeframes will be. if I'm right in any way. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think the whole serialized thing will be looked at in hindsight in sports at some point in the future as what was going on. Like I very, very minimally have gotten into some sports cards recently. I'm a Mets fan. I'm a Rangers fan. I'm a Jets fan. There's not too many stars to go after there. There's no, I don't think there's any $1 million cards on any of those teams, but I'm trying to look up a 1 of 99, 1 of 100, and there's a red, orange, yellow. There's the whole rainbow. There's prisms. There's patches. There's signed on cards, signed on stick. There's so many variants. It's mind boggling. And when something's 1 of 1, when everything's limited, nothing's limited, right?
Mm-hmm.
To an extent. When everyone's super, nobody's super. Something along those lines.
Okay, so the second part of the argument is that through these serialized things that are going on, so there are two ways that we're creating rarity, mass produced rarity. We're creating mass produced rarity by condition rarity, which you talked about, and we're also creating mass produced rarity by creating many 1 of 1s, 1 of 10s, 1 of 99s, and because there are so many, none of it is going to be all that rare, right? Basically, and that those are the two main reasons that come to your head why we might be at an 8.
Those are two like glaring things that I see going on that just feel unsustainable. And one,
Yeah.
like one very indicative example, like if I wanted to use something and point at that and say, this scares me and this kind of shows what's going on to an extent. V-Friends, sorry to pick on you, but V-Friends are the canary in the coal mine. They're when things like that are going on, that really sets off some alarm bells for me.
Yeah, so I think that for me, first of all, I think that is very important, Dan's argument. And I think that if you do not take that argument really seriously and understand how that could be a possibility, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. So for me, I think that Dan is too pessimistic. And I am definitely not an 8 on a 10. But I think everything that Dan said has a lot of validity and certainly moves me from being like a 1 or a 2, much more in sort of like, I would put myself maybe in like a 4 range right now, but that's a lot more bullish than an 8, right? So I'm more on the side of like, this stuff is going to be really popular for generations and that cardboard is going to do well for a while. And, but I think there's at least like an 8 type range. There's at least in my mind a 20% or so chance that Dan's correct, like, which is a significant, that sort of Dan's view, and Dan's view to me makes a lot of sense. So where I am at, and one thing I think sometimes is like, maybe we can overthink some of the stuff a little bit, and we can ask a question of like, how fun is this? Are people having fun? Are serialized cards fun? Are collecting them fun? Are graded cards fun? Is it fun gambling and speculating and flipping and going to conventions and meeting people and having these conversations? Are people having a good time? Right? And I think people are having a great time doing this. And I think the majority of people are having a great time doing it. And I think people are going to have really good times doing it with their kids and their families. And I think that although there is a mania element, and I agree with where you're pointing, I think some of the biggest danger and some of the craziest prices are coming from a little bit of that mania. I think like the core of a lot of this stuff is built on things that just we enjoy. And because of that, and because of social media, and because of all of the money and the businesses joining in, and this is where I think would be an interesting discussion, right? It's because it's like, I agree with Dan. I think that a lot of these grading card companies think the demand is going to be way more than there is. I think they're probably that we're going to have a number of them go out of business, or they're not going to be able to keep grading a million cards a month or multiple million. Like, I'm just not sure where all of these valuable cards are going to come from. But do I think some, and the key ones and the key sort of most important things in this hobby are going to retain value and go up over time? If I were to put my money somewhere, yes or no, I would put it on yes, because I think these hobbies are so enjoyable and fun. And because I think that you can narrow those things down to only some cards. It doesn't have to be every card forever, like that needs to be investable, right? Or these types of things. And I think that all of these types of conversations helps people think more critically about, what do I value? Like, what do I enjoy? do I really enjoy graded cards? Do I really enjoy the 10? Or am I stonking, and am I just buying, and bubbles happen, just as Dan, sort of alluding to, in my opinion, bubbles happen when the greed takes over and it gets away from like the fun. But a bubble can't really happen if everyone is really enjoying it and spending money on things that they are having a lot of fun with. So I think there's also can be a little bit of over fear of like the whole thing disappearing, when in reality a lot of that fear is only there because people like it, and because people are worried about the thing that they really like disappearing, so or becoming less valuable or not as fun. So are there some things that are absolutely in a bubble and some sort of super bubble? Sure. But I think the idea of like a super bubble to me is like, we are all just insane and have lost our minds, and none of us actually like this stuff, right? This would be like a 10 to me. We've all gone insane. These are these are tulips. Nobody likes tulips, right? If people are aware of like the tulip bulb mania, nobody likes tulips. These things have absolutely no value or connection to anyone's lives. We are all just buying them because we've been sold something that they're rare or valuable and important when they're not. We're all spending years worth of salary on things that don't matter to us. And in a few years, we're all going to realize that these things are plentiful, that these things are endless, and that these things don't matter to us. And everything I just said, Dan, you can poke holes in that and you can say, well, the stuff does feel endless. There are things that I think that Dan can say, there are things that I think aren't that valuable, or people are saying they like, but they don't actually like. There is some of that mania, right? And I think there is, but I think that overall, and I think that we're in a place now where, because a lot of these discussions are happening, and I think a lot more people are still buying right now, even with the mindset that Dan has, or that sort of like that, like an understanding that sort of thing. And just the fact that we're like, channels like this are doing great and doing as well as they have. And like the National is like super crowded, and tons of people are interested in like pop culture cards and all sorts of things, and are bringing their families in, and there's a lot of joy and fun. I think that the idea of a super bubble, to me, like comparing it to like the tulip bubble, doesn't make sense. So I think that and I've always felt that this stuff has a lot of collector value. At the same time, I think you can get a little bit crazy with, like, first of all, not many people like to collect things. Not that many people even enjoy collecting things. And among those people, to think that like it's all just going to be cards, or the vast majority is going to be cards. Or what I would ask people, how is there enough room for cards and DVDs and CDs and movies and graded Apple, electronic products and graded video games, and where does what in that feels more bubbly and less bubbly? And that's kind of how I think of it. So do you want to add anything to that before we bring on the guests?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. Just to contextualize it a bit further, or I'm not going to try to walk back anything, but I think grading and the higher prices that pulls are at the more bubbly end. I might attribute a slightly higher number to the plastic encapsulated cardboard. And I think again, grading is necessary. It was brought in. It's just been, I can't think of the right word for it, but it's been twisted from its original intentions, and it's just been used to stunk everything to the moon. I think if you're collecting binders of raw card, like inherently, the more you pay, the more of a premium you pay for something, the more risk there is. Like some people, I think, have out there an opinion. Tens have the least risk because they're tens, and the pop is this number, and there's this many people in the world, and there's this many people that collect Pokemon. At the end of the day, the intrinsic value of all these things are zero. They provide no utility. They're not needed to support life. They don't have intrinsic values that you can calculate of the property or the equipment or the manpower, the intellectual property. That there's none of that. And at the end of the day, the only way it has value is if people decide to exchange money for it. So a lot of people out there, I think the bubble could pop, this super bubble, if it's a thing, it could pop, and 90% maybe of people interacting with these hobbies won't even care or won't even be affected because they go to Walmart and they buy a pack and, oh, I hit a Moonbreon and it's in my binder. Maybe it's folded in half, put in my pocket. And the people who buy and consume and consider that money spent and don't care about future value, they're not going to be harmed because they're already not even doing it for financial incentive. The more you're spending, the more premium you're putting on a third party's opinion or a plastic encapsulation, the more at risk you are if and when I'm right at all. And again, it's not a certainty by any means. It's my postulation. And the timing is something that I have no idea. But I'm quite confident 90% of cards 5, 10, 20 years from now will not be selling for what they're selling for today. They'll be selling for lower. And one thing I point towards in sports is a more mature, older hobby. I didn't go to the National, but there's $1 bins at the National. $1 monster boxes, 5 rows, 1,000 slabs. And there are mint 9 cards in there of popular players at the time, of good players at the time. There's not 86 Fleer Jordan rookies. There's not 52 Mantles. There's not T206 Onus Wagners. But there are millions of slabs already that no one will pay $1 for. We're going to get there in Pokemon eventually. And I argue that of the 40 million cards PSA's graded today, 36 million of them, 90% of them, 10 years from now will be worth quite a lot less than people paid for them originally. That's
yeah, but I don't think that. So I think there are two different things you're talking about here, though. So I think one is because I heard two separate things. One, I heard that like 99% of cards are going to be worth less or fairly worthless over time, right? And I think that that's true for almost every hobby, even the most, and these cards are actually designed that way. They're designed to have like some ultra ultimate whatever rare, or the big hits or the rare or the rookies or whatever, and then a lot of other stuff that ends up being bulk, right? And so I don't think that's a bubble at all. I think most people realize that and expect that. But the other thing you said was more like the people who are taking it very seriously are the ones who are going to get burned financially. So the people who are
investors largely.
Yeah, so the investors who are grading and putting a lot of money in like the high graded stuff because it's rare are the ones that are going to lose the most money, which to me is like the exact opposite argument. Then you're talking about like the 1% of 1% of cards, or the cream of the crop or whatever. And to me, I just disagree with that. Like I now, do I think there's a 20-30% chance you're right? Of course. Like, I think I think that only time will tell. But, and again, it depends which cards, but to say like so would you argue that every single card in this hobby, no matter what the card is, no matter what the grade, is going to be worth less in 10 years than it is now?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's why I said 90+%. I'd be quite confident.
But I think everyone would agree with, or like I think the more stronger statement is that every single thing, or like every single set card, you could say.
If you picked specific examples, I guess you could get more. You could get more insight, maybe, but it's hard to attribute exact percentages. But I think, and we should get a guest on here probably, and I can get into other points and elaborate further probably as we.
We'll definitely have a discussion. All right, thank you both for waiting. So we got Pokelads up, and then we got Mile High Pokemon on deck. Who hasn't turned on his camera, but hopefully he'll turn on his camera when he's ready. Hey, no rush. So if anyone else wants to come on, Mason, I'm sure we'll keep being the A+ mod that he is on multiple channels. He's just killing it everywhere. And we'll send you the link. But let's bring up Pokelads now. You ready? Okay. And then I see Tommy also down there. We will also bring you on, Tommy. Thanks for waiting. All right. All right, Pokelads, how we doing?
Yeah, good.
Hello.
Hi, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. I just thought I'd give a little bit of background about myself. So
Please.
I've got a little bit of collecting experience in Pokemon, NBA, soccer, NFTs, Top Shot, UFC. So I've sort of dabbled in a lot of different things. Pokemon is sort of where my true collecting is, because I've got 2 boys and I love Pokemon, and I really want to try and build a really great collection for them to sort of hand down in the future. But yeah, I've just enjoyed collecting over the last couple of years. And before we sort of get into the question, I just wanted to say thanks, because 2 or 3 years ago, I do remember watching your channel, and I think everyone was very, buy the modern, buy everything like that. And I think you were probably one of the only content creators that were saying, look, guys, just settle down. There might be a bubble. There's modern. There's a lot of things going on. So no, I do appreciate you sort of just keeping that level-headed sort of view on the hobby. So I think that was missed about 2 years ago, and a lot of people sort of got burnt from that.
I'm glad it was useful. Glad it was helpful.
That was good. In relation to the question, I sort of agree with Dan. Just about 80-90% of the cards sort of, I don't know how relevant they're going to be in the next 10-20 years. Coming from a basketball point of view, I'm really concerned about Panini and their license coming up and finishing up in the next couple of years. They're rolling over to Fanatics, I think in 2-3 years' time, for their NBA and NFL. They are printing, I really hope we don't have parallels into Pokemon, because I'll give you an example how bad it's got. So Trevor Lawrence, if you know who that is, he's the number 1 pick in NFL. He has 1,000 one-of-ones. Mm-hmm. So it's just, is that really a one-of-one? And if there's 100, there's the greens, the blue, as Dan was saying, the zebra, the turkey, the green, you have about 50 parallels. And I just feel like it's in their best interest in the next few years to just keep expanding those parallels, mm-hmm. and just keep going until they end their sort of tenure, and then Fanatics take over. So I'm more concerned about the sports side of things than Pokemon, because I do think there is that collectability side to things, and people love Pokemon, where there's a lot more speculation in, I'm going to pick the next rookie, and I'm paying $300,000 for a card, and it just goes bust. He breaks, tears an ACL or whatever that is. So that's my stance on it at the moment.
How much? What are those rookies ranging in price? Do you know? Like from sort of your top end set to your least popular. What would you estimate?
Yeah, so so it really varies depending on the player, but the national treasures of, say, like a Trevor Lawrence, I think that's off about 250,000 US.
Sure.
And then the lower ends, it could probably be a few thousand, if you can find it. But it just sort of dilutes the product as well. So you have your higher end products, and then there's the NBA hoops, where it's a bit cheaper. But I guess that's my concern as well. I sort of don't want Pokemon to go down that path, because the cost of the boxes is going to go up. People are going to store them. They're going to try and flip them. Mm-hmm. Maybe they will make 1 million parallels of a Pikachu, where it just doesn't mean anything anymore, Mm-hmm. And will there be that mentality for the kids where they're just collecting it to buy, to make, and flip it to make profits, or to actually keep for themselves?
And one thing too, like I don't know where the 1,000 number came from, if that's like an actual number that's tracked somewhere. Trevor Lawrence, say he goes on to be a GOAT, say he goes on to win 10 Super Bowls in a 20-year career. He's not going to, probably, but say he did. They're still printing one-of-ones, triple logo mans of Michael Jordan, right? I mean, they're putting, if he ends up being a GOAT, if he ends up being an all-timer, 20-year career, he lives 50 years beyond that. There might be 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 one of ones of one player. Like, and that's one thing too that Pokemon hasn't seen yet. But one thing I worry a little bit for like the rookie Raichu, let's say the base set first edition Raichu. I don't know what the pop is off the top of my head. Probably a couple hundred base set first edition PSA 10 Raichu. I know Charizard is like 120-ish. So what happens when Raichu comes out in 5 years with a 1 of 1 black and a 1 of 5 orange and a 1 of 10 rainbow? And that's going to pull some amount of money. The money's all competing with each other to an extent, right? Not everyone in the world loves cardboard. There's somewhat of, I mean, you can grow the pie. You can get more people engaged in cardboard. You can get more money in. But to some extent, these products do compete for dollars with each other to an extent.
I think we're definitely all in agreement about the dangers of. So, I mean, the way that I would try to break this down or think about it, right, is because I think that if I'm defining super bubble as everything, not like that, you know. So for me, I think I like to think of it as like stress testing things. So I stress test these things by, it's like exactly what Dan just said. What happens to my $200,000 sport card when XYZ probably happens? You know, there's more of this printed, there's more of that, whatever. So there's a debate, right? And there's pluses and minuses. Every new set, let's just take Pokemon, right? Every new set of Pokemon that comes out, theoretically, like the Pokemon company is the one making money, and everyone else, you know, and then your middlemen and your distributors are making money. The grading card company is probably likely making money from them grading, but everyone who's like buying it on the secondary market as like consumers, potentially more of the money is being diverted away, just as Dan said, we could say diverted away from the previous set or from vintage or from whatever that might go there. So if like they stop printing Pokemon tomorrow, there'd be no more new sets for this to compete with, and thus all of the money that's interested in Pokemon forever that was interested in cards forever would have to be in the sets and the cards that already exist, right? So the counter argument to something like that is that every new set that comes out is bringing more people and more engagement into the hobby. And that if they stopped making cards, would that mean that the Pokemon company's not advertising and bringing new generations and kids in? Would it mean that a lot of like the money and the incentive for these middlemen and these LGSs and the whole structure would fall apart and it would become a dead CCG? And then who would continue to kind of prop it up? Only the secondary market people, which is what has happened to all of these like dead CCGs and TCGs that I collect. Score is not the one creating DBZ Facebook groups to talk about scorecards and keeping that alive. It was secondary market people who love this stuff and collect it. So I think there are pluses and minuses to all these things. I don't think that it's easy to map that all out, but clearly, when you have lots and lots of different one of ones of the same rookie from the same year, all of those cards are very likely competing with each other. And you have to be careful with something like that. But at least right now, it seems like there's enough demand, which is stunning to me, because I don't know why anyone in the world would want a one of one of a brand new rookie quarterback for $200,000 who hasn't proved anything. That's because that's just me, right? Like someone else might be a huge fan of, Trevor Lawrence and see a lot of, and think he's going to be amazing and have some sort of theories about why he's going to really stand out, and why, one theory I could think about would be like, we're early enough in the serialized era that some of these serialized cards are still going to be like the early serialized cards. And I think about this with like Marvel PMGs, as they continue to make more and more PMGs. How are these Marvel PMGs going to continue to retain value? Or is it just going to be the 2013 to 2017 ones that have the hugest value because of the attrition rates, the fact that a ton of them were also not kept in mint condition, were not graded, were not kept in perfect condition, and they'll always be the first, right? So in sports, we have rookies, and that's how sports. So every year they're sort of like the first of the player, right? So that's one way that it'll always be a different player, always be someone new. The negative can be like, well, players come and go, players get injured, players disappear. The other negative can be like in 30 years or 20 years, are people going to care about, like, even if they're great, there's going to be more and more people in the Hall of Fame. Like, people don't even think about it. Like, what if there are 15 all-time greats or 30 all-time greats all competing with each other, rather than then it's really like, well, is it just the first all-time great that should be the most expensive, right? So generally speaking, all of these things follow this very simple rule of like, it's the first, it's the most, and it's the stuff that had the most attrition. It was probably the stuff that got beat up the most, that had the least value. Like, those are the patterns we see. And because of that, I'm in complete agreement with both of you. It puts all that stuff in like, your bubble senses should be tingling for sure with that stuff. And like, this is crazy. This seems a little crazy, but, Dan, you wanted to say something at a couple points.
Yeah, and I think what is inherent and required of a bubble is that people are buying an item or an asset solely with the intent to sell it for more down the line. And I would ask anybody, if I knew who the buyer was, I would ask, when you buy a $200,000 one of a rookie, maybe it's somebody who went to high school with him, who has $100 million net worth and just really like Trevor Lawrence and doesn't care whether it goes up or down. But largely, I think the plastic encapsulated cardboard high end, I think, is largely fueled by speculation and intent to sell for more down the line. I did see something in chat earlier from Low Pop Pokey. He said, when a card is sold, do you think that, I think he had a couple specific examples, which I forget, but he said, do you think when this card is bought that it's with intent to sell for more down the line? Mm-hmm. I think oftentimes, yes, honestly. And at times when not, I think oftentimes it's bought with intent for it to at least maintain value. Sure. And again, certain cards I think will, and certain cards won't. It gets a bit more complicated when you try to sort out which ones will and which ones won't.
The one thing I would say is that the rarest, most historic pieces, though, are things that like you might have a couple of chances to get in your life with any amount of money. So there are some pieces that, and we don't see that as much in Pokemon particularly yet. And I think we saw a lot of those pieces come up this year, but they're like, when we talk about other like older, more established hobbies, there are items that may come across, grails type things where if you have the money, it becomes the collector. It's like, this is an amazing special piece to have in my collection. And I do think that, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, I really think people enjoy this, and yes, the financial side can also be very enjoyable, but I also think the collecting, the challenge of that, the getting these important, cool pieces that other people recognize, it's all part of this. And I think grading connects with it, both in the authenticity and also the condition. But as you see in these other more established hobbies, like eye appeal, right? Like, is it good looking? Becomes more important than the grade, or at least as important, right? So, and I think those are good signs. Like, even the fact that like more people are thinking like Dan right now, to me shows, and yet people are still buying with those thought processes and still liking graded cards, shows me that I was the first one probably to talk about grading mania, I think, or to say that a lot on my channel, right? Because I was really seeing that. But I do think that there's some sort of middle ground there, probably between.
I'm actually interested to hear your thoughts, Jake, on something. I think Pokemon, obviously it's got the IP and it's gonna be around. It's gonna have those key cards, and it's always gonna be art to a lot of people, whether it's the Charizard PSA 10 first edition or the Illustrator or specific cards. I think will always hold that value, a bit like those Mickey Mantles down the track. I don't know if it's going to reach that level down the track. I hope it does, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts about Michael Burry and his thoughts. The guy who with that movie that he did, and he was saying, I think there was a recent quote that he said around we're in the greatest speculative bubble of all time. Not just in, and look, maybe that's not just cards. Maybe it's watches, it's jewelry, it's real estate. Are we in a broader issue here, not just Pokemon? And I personally think we probably are a little bit, where there's still maybe a little bit more pain to come. But and maybe that's an opportunity for us down the track. But maybe he makes a valid point. Maybe it is all speculation over the last couple of years. A lot of money has been poured into the economy, and that has a big impact, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that both from a psychological place of people just being so used to like making money or growth, or everything just needs to grow and everything needs to make money and everything, right? Like that sort of thing. I mean, we're in sort of the longest bull run in history, right now. I do think like things like the amount of debt in this country, both the country itself, which actually doesn't even worry me nearly as much as like just the people's debt to banks, is crazy and has gotten much, much larger. Student debt is part of that, as a decent portion of that. These non-bankruptable types of debt. Like there's all sorts of conversations to be had in there. There's all sorts of concerns and worry in that. People still love this stuff. People still enjoy this stuff. It's not a tulip bubble. Are there problems with money in our society? I'm sure. How bad are those problems, and how scary have things now? And to Dan's point, these are items that we do not need. These are not our physiological needs. These are our joys, right? So if we're thinking of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this has to do with like how we actualize and engage with other people and have fun hobbies and set goals and meet things. But these are things that are like very vital to our culture and our happiness and feelings of success and joy in our lives. And so could we get to a point where like the vast majority, like we're in such bad financial straits that like everything gets stripped for like the vast majority of people back to like physiological needs and all money goes there? Sure. But I also think it's important to realize that like that feels potentially very extreme. And I really don't know. I think there are a lot of people who are sort of like perma bears and are sort of always, they're really important to listen to because they're always like, they're right in a sense, but they're also like, they don't ever talk about like the upside or the ups and downs or like the flow. They seem to just focus on the catastrophe and like when the next catastrophe is going to happen. And there's also a lot of people who like, that's how they make their money. They bet on catastrophes. And there's a lot of like data about how people like, there's wishful thinking. So like people are much better at anticipating bull runs than they are in anticipating like bears and bubbles and destruction, because it's so painful to acknowledge that there's a bubble. Like we don't want that. We hope that things are always going up. So we have like a human bias, which I think is very interesting. And so there's a lot of people who like bet on catastrophe because people don't like betting on catastrophe. So it's like inherently a decent bet, whatever. It's a whole nother discussion. But okay, we do have 3 people waiting, but I just want to give you a chance. Is there anything else, Pokey Lads, that you want to say or add tonight? And we really appreciate you coming on. Please come on again, anytime.
No worries. Thank you for having me on. I guess, the last point I'll make before I head off, because I want other people to jump on, is is there too many places and auction houses that we have at the moment? Do we have PWCC, Heritage, eBay? It's just there's so many cards that are sort of flooding onto the market. I've noticed in sport cards where it's actually dragged a lot of the bigger prices down. Where it's that's going for $100,000 on Heritage, but the same card's going on PWCC, and they're low pop, but they're still getting impacted because they're sort of competing against each other. And a lot of cards sort of go unnoticed as well. PSA 10s and things like that, where there's so many sports cards that are just PSA 10s. It doesn't matter. No one's buying. People are buying them, but they're not paying the prices that people want. So anyways, I'll leave it to you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Have a nice night. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you. Yeah, I think a lot of these conversations are going to be really interesting, I think, with auction houses, with businesses. I'm for me, so much of this conversation is a wait and see, and I put more percentages on it rather than being comfortable, like obviously predicting what's going to happen. It's going to be more of a thing that we're going to see gradually unfold, and we're probably going to like have a sign or a sense that we're going to see, like Dan and I track data all the time. So we're going to like literally see how much is actually selling. What are the prices that, and, we are going to sell some of our stuff on Rare, like probably on Rare Candy and other places to see how it does. So, but the more competition you have in the space of these companies, the more, and if more people join, and this is both for buying cards, this is both the demand and what puts up the price of cards. And then all of a sudden you have a shrinking in demand and price and value of all of these, but you've had all this infrastructure, both in the grading card companies and the auction houses built, and you're paying all these salaries. What you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of layoffs. You're going to see a lot of layoffs at grading card companies, or they're just going to go under completely. If that, constriction happens. Now, is it also possible that like they're making plans for that and that a lot of their hires right now are potentially temporary, or like they have like, they're very on top of it. And these are just really smart people who are aware of this. Absolutely. Right. And they know the numbers every day. Like they're actually seeing how much they're grading all the time. So as long as they're doing that and realistic, like they probably, they can manage that as time goes on. It doesn't need to be a thing where it's like all of a sudden massive layoffs. It's like, can be more of like a slow, gradual kind of process of reacting to the market type of thing. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, PSA scaled quite rapidly. I worked in an industry as a chemical engineer where the capital expenditure and the research and development into developing our products and scaling processes was massive. The environmental regulations and hoops that had to be jumped through. These people are putting cardboard in plastic. You can scale that very easily. The equipment required to do it is very cheap, relatively speaking. It's not manufacturing cars. It's not manufacturing specialty chemicals. It's not that difficult. And honestly, like the more we converse, 45 minutes in, maybe more appropriately, my stance should be 8 out of 10 on a cardboard encapsulated in plastic super bubble. I think a lot of the stonking on raw cardboard is drawn up by what it goes for in PSA 10. You watch the YouTube streams, a card is pulled. Here's the PSA 10 price. Way worse in 2020, before I had my channel, when you had me on and we talked about the EVs and the Pikachus and all that. So yeah, I think more appropriately, a grading super bubble is what I would go back to or adjust to get more appropriate with the wording.
But it feels like that's because like the singles and the raw cards are reflecting those prices. So I just want to say that, because I think that's important, is that if some of that is true, it's going to affect everything probably, because I think a lot of, particularly mint things, because they're being priced in part off of that. Now maybe your LP, binder cards are definitely not, or might be less affected.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's bring Mile High Pokemon on now. Love the name. We're looking forward to Denver, and how we doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, my name's Eli, so you can call me that. But I think I got a table around you all.
Awesome.
At Collectathon, so I'll be around there.
Yeah.
It's an interesting topic. I think that on being a super bubble, I would say no, in the sense that I think right now, for whatever last 6-9 months, with the inflation rate going up, and then the less relatively disposable income that people have, the fact that there haven't been crashes across the board, I think probably indicate that there isn't a dire need to sell a lot of this product for a lot of people. And the fact that, there's obviously been retraces, but, I am active in a lot of the Facebook markets around here in Denver. And I would think that with the higher inflation rate, I was expecting to see a lot more like fire sales, and this fact that people need cash for just, their rent going up $200 a month or whatever it is. And that would lead to selling product. And I've just not really been seeing that. there's been some extent of definitely like selling, but it's been not nearly as much as I would have thought if I had guessed, and especially not nearly as many slabs. I would have thought a lot of people are, I think, just getting rid of bulk product and the rest, but that's pretty normal. There's just way too much bulk now, but I think that's the thing that's been the most surprising to me. But I think that doesn't necessarily mean that the hobby is just going to keep growing. And I think the big thing is, I would guess that last year out of all the packs opened of the modern product, probably 80% was opened by like adults spending money on, their own hobbies. And maybe that's an overestimate, but I was just thinking about how when I was a kid, maybe through my entire childhood, I opened 100 Pokemon card booster packs, and that was just like a special thing that I would get when I was going to the store. And over last year, it's definitely been like more than that, and I'm not even on the higher end of opening product. So I think that a lot of money being spent is coming from adults right now in a way that we don't adequately estimate. And a lot of the growth happening right now, obviously, is based off kids who are people who are not hobbyist kids. But I just think that the hobby is so much more adult oriented than we give it credit for, that I'm not sure like the growth is as sustainable as a lot of other people think, just based off the fact that a lot of Pokemon fans today aren't, the demographics aren't nearly as young as it used to be, especially in the games as well. So I think that's my summary. Not a bubble, but also not more bubbles to be, I think.
And we forgot to ask Pokelads, 1 being fine art, 10 being super bubble.
Right.
Where would you be on that spectrum?
So we'll ask you, Eli. Where are you at? 1 to 10.
And Pokelads, if you're in the chat still, let us know 1 to 10.
I think we're definitely closer to the fine art spectrum in the sense that people are definitely buying, I think, a lot of the cards, not out of speculation, but out of genuine love for what the card looks like, and especially on the raw side. I can't say the same, obviously, on the slabs. I think there's more speculation going on, but I think in the day-to-day, and really, we don't admit this, but a lot of the day-to-day spending is on raw cards and booster packs and all that. I think that people are taking it much more seriously, not as a speculative asset. But yeah, I guess on the slabs is probably closer to Stunky. But I just don't think, I think we just underestimate the amount of money. Like if you took the market cap of some of these cards, it's still like nothing compared to the amount of money spent to open product. And that's not even taking into account the amount of money that we're actually spending on slabs. I bet if you took all the money spent on slabs over the last year, it would be nothing compared to the amount spent on open product. So I think that's where a lot of the money is and a lot of the enthusiasm anyway, that people way into the YouTube space don't really admit.
And you can do really quick math too on that. So 9.1 billion cards. When Pokemon sells a pack, and some of it is like ETBs, the energy packs. Some of it is just energy cards, things like that. So when a pack sells at retail, it's 10 cards for $4, 40 cents a card. Let's be really conservative and say like 10 cents a card, because some of those are code cards, energy cards, things that are thrown in that don't really. So 9.1 billion cards, 10 cents a card. That would be $900 million as like the market cap to consume those 900 billion cards. Retail, that's not the wholesale. That's not what Pokemon's getting. And then same thing goes for PSA. I mean, you can quickly do, they grade 10 million cards a year approximately at their current pace. They only graded about, what was it in 2021? I have the exact number somewhere, but they graded not 10 million in 2021. In 2022, they will grade 10 to 12 million. So we don't know
everything.
Exactly.
That's not Pokemon cards, right? That's
not
everything.
Pokemon cards. That's everything. So very approximately. The problem is we don't know. 80% of their capacity had been being done on the backlog. So 80% of it, 8 million of those 10 million were done at $10 and less. So 80 million there in grading fees. And then how much of that was the higher? How much of it was 600 a card? How much was 50 a card? It's really hard to say. But I mean, let's say $20 a card average, because some of those high ends really drag it up. That would be approximately 200 million, right, in grading fees. Just to throw some numbers out there, some quick math estimations for whatever interest that may provide.
Yeah, I think what I was trying to get at too, not just on the grading fees themselves, if you took all the slabs that were sold on eBay for the last month and you added it up, if there's, say, I don't know, 1,000 slabs a day selling for an average of $60, I mean, I don't know what the real average would be. I think it wouldn't come close to the amount of sealed product being sold in terms of money spent.
I think to summarize two things here, right? So one, you started talking about inflation and saying that despite, there was some maybe understandable anxiety that despite all this inflation, that people were, not going to be able to spend money on Pokemon cards anymore because they're spending it on gas, groceries, et cetera, et cetera. And that, Eli saying that he's surprised that it didn't sort of have more of an impact on it, which to him, he interprets that, correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, Eli, but that you sort of, that made you more confident that although maybe things went down a little bit, it was sort of, the fact that it didn't collapse even more shows you that the people who are buying these things are probably, and I don't think you said this, but to maybe add, the people who are buying these things are not that close to a lot of them, unless they're buying them on credit, which is part of my concern and worry is the credit numbers, but are not so close to, not being able to pay their bills, that sort of inflation put them over the top where they could no longer buy these items. Okay. So the second point is that, so much money, and I want to hear Dan respond to this because I think it's interesting. So much money, so much more money. Because one thing that Dan says a lot is that most people who are buying this stuff are, I don't want to be unfair to the way you say this, like are going to lose or are going to end up being consumers rather than any sort of investor, if we're comfortable with that sort of language. And I agree with that, but it almost kind of goes to Eli's point of like, maybe most of those people are the ones like opening packs, but how about the people, the smaller amount of people? It's like, well, maybe 90% of the money, all this money is being spent on opening these packs and sometimes very expensive packs. Whereas only 1/10 of that or 1/50th of that or 1/100th is actually being put into buying the actual card or the graded card, because it's so much cheaper to do that. So maybe the fact that that's so different shows that there's so much money interested in this, and that the graded stuff or the single market is maybe more safe than we think. Is that fair, Eli? That you're kind of is that sort of your point to summarize it?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, so Dan, what would be your response to that sort of idea? Because I think it actually falls in line with some of your thinking. And maybe, but maybe you want to push back a little. I'm not sure on sort of, that doesn't make me comfortable because, blank, X, Y, and Z.
And just quickly, PokeLad said he's 7 out of 10 in the chat. So
7 out of 10 bubble. Okay.
Yeah, 7 out of 10 towards the cardboard super bubble. Or
Eli, did you give us a number?
I guess I would say on the raw stuff, probably 3 out of 10, and then on slabs, probably closer to a 6 or 7.
Okay. And that's where, I think I've refined my position, and it's a cardboard, plastic encapsulated cardboard. I'm an 8 out of 10, which drags up the cardboard and everything else with it. So I think to address the question posed towards me, I would say I've been doing this full time for 1 year. Maybe I should have had that disclaimer earlier on. For anyone unfamiliar with me, but I think many people are on this channel. I've been on it quite a bit. For the first 7 years in the hobby, I was a net putting money in, time in. I'm now a business. By definition, I function to profit from it. I remove capital from the hobby every year. That's my main intent every year from here on out. I'd be a bad business if it wasn't. Pokemon as well. Pokemon removes money from the hobby. They reinvest in themselves. Same thing with PSA. They remove money from the hobby in that respect, but then they reinvest in themselves. They grow. They're trying to grow the hobby and grow with it. Same thing goes for Heritage Golden, PWCC, Hakes, Memory Lane, all these different auction companies, whatnot, eBay. What I think I was trying to get at earlier, and I guess what I'm just saying in a different way, for those whose intent is to be a net, like many people interact with this hobby in a way by design, they are net capital input. They are going to be net negative over the next week, over the next year, over the next decade, over their lives. Some people are the truest of true collectors, and they intend to be capital input forever. Sometimes they sell, but they're always buying more. They don't really care. They maybe they care about the Pokenomics of it. Maybe they care about the finances of it solely for making their dollar go as far as possible. For those people, again, it doesn't matter. Like, those people are not going to be harmed because of their intent, because of the way they interact. I think the people more likely to be harmed are the people who are intending to be net capital removers. Investors inherent, some will be fine if you're interacting with the highest of high end. Maybe you're more likely to be fine. I would almost argue in some circumstances, though, again, the more of a premium you put on the plastic, the longer the distance to zero is. I'm not saying it's all going to zero again. Just I'm putting that all out there. So yeah, to raw cards versus graded, I think raw cards are just inherently safer because the numbers you're paying for them are closer to zero. And I think if your intent is to be net capital negative, putting money in, you're going to be fine. Like, if you, and that goes to a core thing. Do you see this as an asset on your balance sheet, or do you see this as a liability? I think too many people see these things as assets when they're much closer or definitively liabilities. And that's getting into the finance side of it. And yeah, I don't know if that was too indirect to answer the question, or if you have any further.
I think we're generally in agreement on those points. I think the one caveat I would say, based off my earlier sort of inflation point, which is going back a bit, is that over the last 6 to 9 months, I think the one part of the economy we've seen people doing better is people at the bottom strungs, because the labor market has been so strong. We've seen wages, especially in the lower sectors, outpacing inflation. And so I don't know if there's like a hidden collection amongst a lot of lower income Americans, or not hidden, but if there's, they were stonking on Pokemon cards during the pandemic. I don't really think so, because even a lot of people said pandemic checks went into Pokemon. Maybe so, but I can't imagine $1,000 really made that big of a difference. But if there is kind of like a reservoir of Pokemon product among, lower income Americans, it's possible that if their wages were to recede once the labor market weakens, then we could actually see an amount of the bubble pop. But I just don't see that happening, because I think most of the money that went into the hobby was not of low income people. So that was kind of the one caveat I wanted to make on the inflation point.
Interesting, guys. Eli, anything else to add before we bring our next person on?
No, I just want to say thank you all for chatting. We actually, my partner and I, started selling bulk like a month and a half ago or so. And I've had a lot of interesting learning experiences and reflections on it, because I think people don't give bulk enough credit, but also it is definitely a lot of work. And I think on another time, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Your username, can I say your username on Discord?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
It's, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's Pelislan or whatever.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I thought so. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. But I have been sensing, because right now I think is actually one of the better times to get into bulk. You'd be surprised, but like the bulk market is so cheap. I've been literally paying 1.2 cents per card on mixed unsorted bulk, and if you actually average that out, you're paying very, very low for like hollow cards and stuff like that. So if you actually have the heart to go through and sort it, I think it's more profitable than people make it seem.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I think I wonder. I wish we had Danny. Danny, if you're randomly watching right now, but like Danny Phantom, but like there are businesses where like I think a very decent percentage of their revenue, is constantly coming from bulk. It's a big percentage of what they do.
Yeah, I think it's how you define, and then I'll go. I think it's kind of like, how do you define labor? Like for us, some of the bulk sorting, my partner really, really likes sorting. She'll usually do it while watching TV, because she wants something to occupy her hands while she watches television. So it's like, if you're sorting and you're going to do it anyway, or it's either that or you're going to do something else with your hands, knitting or whatever, do we count that towards the labor cost? And so I think, obviously, if you're hiring an employee, you're going to count it towards labor. You have to pay them. And so that's going to bring down the margins considerably. But if you don't actually consider that labor, if you're just planning to use your hands for something while watching TV anyway, then it becomes a lot more profitable if you're doing it yourself and that's how you're calculating it. So,
well, thank you very much. Eli, it's a pleasure, and we're gonna get to hang out in person. It sounds like in Denver, which will be
Yeah,
For
look
sure.
forward to meeting you in Denver.
Nice to chat with y'all. Have a good one.
Take
You
it
too.
easy, man. Thank you. All right, so up next we have Lord Pokey Smoke coming up in just a second here. If anyone else wants to come on or get in line, right now there is no waiting line after Lord Pokey Smoke. I know we had someone else kind of jump in and out if he wants to come back in, or if anyone else does. Mason, if you're there, you can. Mason does a much better job with this than me. I will type the just the link if anyone wants to get in line after that to come on and share their thoughts with us. All right, Lord Pokey Smoke. Hey there.
Good, y'all. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, man. How you doing?
Pretty good. Can't complain. Just hanging out, doing a little work, and listening to y'all chat about the Pokemon market.
Nice. All right. So where are you 1 to 10? Let's start. Let's get organized here.
Down to business.
To 10.
Probably around a 6. I mean, I do agree that I think there's a lot of good stuff. I think there's stuff that. Well, first of all, I'm not buying this stuff to invest in it. Mostly, I'm buying it because, I like having this next to my desk, right? Like I like looking at the cards that I like, and fundamentally, I don't really plan on selling them that much. I mean, I do sell and buy, but it's mostly just to buy more cards. But yeah, I mean, I think there's some stuff that's not great, like very heavy modern. Overgraded stuff that's selling for very, very high prices, but then there's also there's old stuff, there's stuff people haven't found yet, not hugely in the Pokemon market, but I don't know, there's a lot of good things, and I don't think we're that it's that bad, but I'm still saying 6 because of a lot of the modern stuff is pretty heavy.
And I think like part of what we're uncovering is throwing out numbers on complex things doesn't really get to the heart of the issue too much, although it's a nice way to kind of start the conversation. And it really depends on what you're talking about and what you're looking at, right? Because like if you step back on the whole thing, you might have one answer, but if you're thinking about specific elements of just the Pokemon market or the whole non-sports market, or if you include the sports market also, because you might be like, well, I think the sports market's in a super bubble because of all the one-of-ones and the serialized, but I think Pokemon isn't. Or you could be, I think the serialized stuff is going to make it not be in a bubble, whereas Pokemon and the 9 billion is, so it's but Dan, thoughts on the 6?
He's on my side, so I'm all about it.
Exactly.
He's on my half of the spectrum. So, yeah, I think again, having to refine it. I could talk for 8.5 hours about my stance on this topic of the night. We'll try not to tonight, but we'll see what happens.
Who would do a stream that long? Weird.
Yeah, I don't know that
only weirdos.
I just picked some outlandish number that no one would ever hit. So. Yeah, to have to distill it down to one singular number out of 10 is obviously, I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to make one title that's X amount of characters or less, right? People like the headlines, so saying what you are out of 10 is useful to some extent and interesting, but yeah, you mentioned ultra modern Pokemon being a bit scarier, and in some ways it definitely is. I mentioned V-Friends earlier. Going beyond, since I've kind of changed it to cardboard encapsulated plastic, an Apple product recently sold, and a sealed. I don't think that was graded, but I would be shocked if they weren't being graded within 2 years. VHSs are being graded. Funko Pops are being graded. Lego sets are being graded. What's not being graded yet?
I should start a grading company.
Yeah, we really need to figure out what the next thing is so that we can get in early, because I think another useful thing or the whole gold rush, right? The gold rush, most of the prospectors, most of the investors in the gold rush didn't strike gold. Some did, and some became rich from striking gold. The people selling the shovels, the people selling the equipment, hunting the gold. I think that's a reasonable analogy to what's going on right now. Some will
Maybe
strike
the first
gold.
companies, but the companies that overexpanded selling the pickaxes
Yeah.
and were too bullish and started their companies late into the process and were not as good at companies.
So I did kind of have a question for y'all based on this exact point. So Dan, I think you brought up earlier, right? This isn't chemical engineering or rocket science. The overhead is pretty easy to set up and break down, and fire your people that you ever extended on. But we have seen TCG player bought Binary POS and Channel Fireball for however much that was. I'm not sure if they said. And eBay comes in, pays $300 million for TCG player. eBay's building a vault. We got these vaults going up everywhere. That's a little bit more capital intensive than just a sonic welder, right? With these larger players putting hundreds of millions of dollars in building this infrastructure to keep doing these kind of things, do you think that they'll protect their investment, and will that help pop up a lot of the market? Do you think that they can help prop up the market if it is going to start going the other way anyway? What's your thoughts on them trying to protect some of that war chest that they just spent all around?
Advertising is very very successful. Advertising works well. Some trends probably happen spontaneously, naturally, but a lot of things are guided by broader advertising. And one thing I should say too, on the whole, PSA is in a spot where they're private. They don't have investors to answer to. They don't have a stock price to worry about, so they can make some drastic actions very quickly and not really deal with too many repercussions from that respect. I forgot to mention that earlier, but I had it on my mind. But yeah, I think even like eBay is a publicly traded company. They do have investors to answer to. I don't know about Heritage. Golden is owned by Collectors Holdings, so they're not. I don't know about Heritage. PWCC, I'm quite certain is a private company. I think as a private company, you have a lot more flexibility to do things. I used to be employed by a private company. And even the whole vault thing, PWCC has a video on their YouTube of the construction of their vault. I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars of cards are in there, but it's not a very complicated thing. It's a piece of real estate in Oregon that might be, I don't know how many couple $1 million of real estate. It's not more than a couple million. Like it's not that capital intensive to build a vault either. The insurances, the things that go on with that. But yeah, I think clearly might be bullish for the hobbies, but also might be long-term destructive if they go the wrong way with it. But all these people, PSA, Topps, Fanatics, eBay, PWCC, Heritage, Golden, they all want the printers to keep printing. They want to do what they can. How much they balance short-term versus long-term, how smart they actually are. I mean, Nat is at the helm of Collectors Holdings with his investment group, and I'm not in those board meetings. I don't know exactly what's in their minds. I don't really know. I think I said a lot of words, but didn't say much substance there. But I did what I could. They have a vested interest. They're going to do what I can, but I think there's a chance they could fail. They could prioritize too heavily short-term gains, and they could sacrifice long-term health of the hobbies if they abuse it too much. I think there's some amount of abuse happening. There's some amount of milking the cash cow going on. And is it too much is the question. That's as succinctly as I can wrap it up. After a long meandering, whatever that was.
I think Fanatics is such a major player, and will be such a major player, and how much they go into non-sports. And Fanatics has said things like they're really going to go overseas and put a lot of like intention on expanding these IPs and engaging in markets all around the world. There's a lot of potential if they
They're
are
private. Fanatics is private as well, if that means anything.
They have a lot of money, and cards is just a small percentage of what they like. They have tons of different revenue lines and all sorts of things. I was talking with we have a family friend who works at Fanatics, and they have really big plans. Again, it's this whole thing of, like, are they going to be able to follow through and succeed with that? Are we towards the beginning of getting a lot more interest? Like, are we going to, in 5 to 10 years, are they really going to be able to, like, make pop culture cards? Like, pop culture cards have never really been a thing. Like, you had the Pokemon cards, like, huge mania, like, in 1999, right? You had, in the US at least, you had, and a few other places around the world, but you had, Yu-Gi-Oh! And obviously Magic, I would say definitely not the same sort of mania ever, or Crazy Fever maybe, but very successful, particularly Magic, right? For significant, on the back of being extremely playable and communities built around playing that game together and all sorts of relationships to that, right? But, like, what about, like, celebrity cards and cards of every game show, right? So in the 60s and 70s, these existed. Topps started making some of these things, right? But they made it like with like sitcoms. Yeah, perfect timing, right? So, and that wasn't even Topps. That was what do they call
Intel, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, right. So there were a number of companies making them, and is this a sign of a super bubble that they're going to try to make more and more and more of this, and that's going to dilute the already successful markets? Or is that going to bring in cross collectors? So people who weren't part of the Pokemon thing, but they really like Stranger Things and they really like whatever the next popular series are, is that going to bring people into card collecting that then later in life they're going to be in the card collecting community when they would never have been if Fanatics didn't do that? And then there are the pluses and the minuses, like everything else. The more cards they make, the more money that these companies can make, the more incentive they have to market and get more people into these hobbies. But then the more cards there's going to be, the more, competition, and there's only so much money, potentially only so much interest. So I think that for me, I'm particularly bullish on the sort of best IP stuff that has been printed the least, that type of thing. Because I think that it has the most to gain without some of the danger of, like, being so reliant on humongous demand that you just need a little bit. So we'll see.
So MetaZoo then?
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. So one person in the chat said, explain the 8 and then heavily investing in MetaZoo. Because those two things seem completely opposite to me, right? Like, inherently, right? Because on the one hand, it's like if we are in a super bubble of sorts, you would think, like, no matter how much we like and enjoy MetaZoo, right? Like, that maybe, like, brand new IPs, even though they're built around these characters, right? We don't have to have a whole discussion on MetaZoo, and perhaps that's my fault for even starting that or engaging that. But it's an interesting sort of idea of, like, why MetaZoo over other things, or does it simply, Dan, just like, I enjoy it and I'm just fine. It's sort of whatever, and I'm willing to put my 8 aside for this one thing because I really enjoy it. And then I have to hold your feet to the fire because I think you don't like graded cards very much personally. So I do think that there's some sort of, like, if I like it, I'm more of, like, in the middle. And if I don't like it, maybe I'm a little negative. That's my interpretation. And I want to give you the floor to just sort of respond to all of that.
Yeah. So on grading, I I have a love-hate relationship with grading card companies. They make my business very, very easy. I love that. It feels kind of bad though, because I sell cards quite frequently that I don't believe in the long-term prospects of. I could be very, very wrong in all of this. There's some percent chance that even I attribute to that. I don't deal in absolutes. It's not, I'm 100% right. I'm putting all my eggs in this. Clearly, I'm not. I mean, I do this full time. So to put that out there up front, but I don't believe in the 10 premium almost universally. I don't believe in the grading card company's ability to have.
Can I ask one thing with that?
Yeah.
Do you not believe in the 10 premium because you think people don't actually like it? At the end of the day, you think people don't actually like it and it's more about making money. Is that what it comes down to for you?
See, I know people love it. People love to have perfect things. 10 out of 10 is literally the highest grade you can get, right? So people love it. People buy labels. People buy brands because they're seen as premium. 10 out of 10 is seen as premium. Put it on a black label slab, it's seen as ultra premium. Ultra premium collection coming out this fall. People love when you make things ultra exclusive, premium, whatever it may be. So, and I know this, like I at my core, I don't believe in their ability, like as an engineer, I see a scale, I see a 1 to 10 scale, and I think what is their, shout out Pokemon Flying Masters video, resolving power? What is their repeatability? What is their accuracy? What is their precision? Everything I drill into from past personal experience and from cards that I've handled, having handled tens of thousands of slabs, I don't believe they have the accuracy nor precision to justify the premiums, but I do understand why many people don't care. 10 out of 10, I don't care.
What about so because you and I agree, and that's where the mania for me is that it got too much into the plastic and too far away from the card. But how about this? How about 10s that should be graded 10s? Let's just talk about that. Let's agree that, right. So because the real discussion to me is, do you think the speck of white and the little bit of scratch on the hollow, do you think people care about that, or do you think it's a mania? Like at the end, because this is the tulip conversation, right? Are we deluding ourselves and this is a short-term mania, or the 10s that should be 10s, the perfect ones, are people going to continue to like those and be willing to pay up for them? Because I think that's actually the most important discussion.
So personally, I couldn't care less. I started as a 9 collector because that was where I saw the optimal value for me. Like I care about front being clean, nice, no scratches, minimal scratches, decent centering. My test is basically at arm length. How does it look? How's the eye appeal at arm's length? And I don't have great eyes. I got LASIK like 10 years ago. They're not the greatest eyes around. So, it started as PSA 9. That's back when PSA 9s of almost any WotC card was like 20, $30 for a lot of them. And the best ones were, I mean, PSA 9 first edition Charizard was under $1,000 when I started. So that's context of why and when I became a 9 collector. Now I'm a binder collector, binder gang. Because to me, the premium on all these things just, and that's personally, and I understand I'm not everybody. I'm a very strange individual in many ways, I think. And I recognize that. So will the market continue to pay the 10 premium? Again, it would almost have to be card by card. 99% of cards, I would say no. But 1%, it might sound drastic to say 99%. They grade so much, and we've had this conversation before. Junk slabs, it's all about intent. If you have a card that you have a connection to and you love it and you paid a price that you had the money and you don't care about the future value, none of those are junk slabs. None of those are bags. We've had that conversation before. So with that disclaimer aside, 99% of what's graded are not junk slabs, but they're going for more than they should be, in my opinion. And will the market change? Not on the high end 1%, but yes, on the others.
So I'm going to answer this really briefly, and then I want to hear your opinion too, Lord Pokesmoke, specifically on it. So give you a second to think about it. Your opinion sort of on, exactly what we're talking about. Do you personally see value, as a collector, as someone that enjoys this in that? And so for me, it's so dependent on the card. And it's not so so for example, like generally speaking, I care much more about the card than the grade. And so generally speaking, and that's specifically important when the card I'm going after to me is a very rare, difficult card to find. So for me, I generally am attracted most to absolute rarity. It gives me the most sort of excitement and enjoyment. Now, the issue in Pokemon is that a lot of the cards I like the best have no absolute rarity. It's just the reality of Pokemon. A lot of my favorite cards in this hobby, and I'm even including Gold Stars. Gold Stars are not that rare. Like, they are fairly rare, but let's even take my favorite cards in the hobby, just base set holos. Okay, these are not very rare items. So I lose the fun or the chase of like the rare or the hard one to get, right? And I have 3 binders just filled with base set holos. And they're all like LP. And I love those binders, right? So it doesn't need to be it can be an and. It doesn't have to be an or, which I think sometimes the conversation gets into. So for me, I love those binders. I also have really enjoyed and love and appreciate like the 10s in my collection of like my favorite cards. And the challenge of getting one that I really liked and that I thought really looked good and had really good centering and these types of things. Now, would I also love it in a 9? Would I also like it in an 8? Absolutely. I love the card. But do I see value in those different grades for myself and for the binder collection? I do, as a collector. So, do I think it deserves the premiums? It does if you can afford it for me. If I couldn't afford it, absolutely not. Like I would not be putting myself in any close to financial stress or situation, and I would not be buying those 10s as like investment plays alone. Okay, I think the investment play is a nice benefit of that type of thing because of the rarity and because there's going to be people in the world like me who can maybe afford that item, who want that item, and that's the law of supply and demand. If there are enough of those people, the prices are going to be high and the prices are going to go up, right? And so for me, that's the collector piece behind it, So, and I assume that there are other people out there who feel like me, right? And if they don't, and I'm fairly alone in this, and it's a little bit more of a bubble than I think, and more people feel the way that Dan feels maybe, or something like that, then possibly. But I actually think that a lot of people also feel the way that I do. And there's so and that the pops are so low. And to Eli's point earlier, like the amount that is spent on the other stuff is so much more than on these. It's not a sports situation where these cards are $250,000 and the rest is bulk. Like like the percentages just feel different. Like I still feel like $500 for an item, $600 for a 10. Like it just doesn't feel crazy to me. Now, when we talk about 200K, or whatever for the PSA 10 first edition Charizard, we talk about these types of things, then I get more of like, that's a lot of money. How many people have that money who have sort of my outlook at this stage of life? Or how much of that is being just bought up by speculators or investors and who don't feel that way? And maybe there's a bit more of a bubble or risk in those types of things versus like people are just buying that because they can really afford it and they really want it. I don't know the answer to that. I think eventually, if Pokemon does well and people stay interested, there's going to be plenty of people to own those cards at those prices because there's just not going to be that many of them. And there are some very rich people in the world, like extremely rich. There are plenty of people who make multiple millions of dollars a year salary, and buying that card is nothing. So, and you just don't need that many people like that. And those people don't need to view it as like an investment or speculation and all. They just need to appreciate it and want that piece of history. So, all right. So what do you think, Lord Pokey Smoke, on that sort of discussion?
I'm a bit more on Dan's side of this. I personally don't have really any 10s. I basically just collect 9s because I'm not going to pay double, triple, or even, I don't know, a couple $100 more for a speck of whitening that's not there, or probably is there on the 10 versus the 9. Just give me the 9, or, I mean, I have an 8 sitting on my desk that looks good, and I like the card. So I do really like slabs. Like I have a good amount of slabs, some that I've graded, a lot that I've purchased already slabbed. But yeah, I think I've maybe only have 1 or 2 10s, and they were just, it was really low in an auction, and I plan to move them on at some point. So yeah, I mean, but to your point though, I mean, if I had Steve Aoki money, or I had, I mean, there's a lot more people. Richie, well, he's one of the richer ones, I guess, in this hobby, right? But there's a lot people with a lot more wealth in this world than anyone that I even know of that's in this hobby, right? And if I had that kind of money, sure, I'm going to get the 10s, but why not, right? If the money didn't matter and I got the same card, but the label said 10 instead of a 9, and literally like, $100 and $500 is the same thing for every card I buy, just buy the 10. But I'm not at the point where money doesn't matter in any way. So,
and I think most people are probably somewhere around that, where it's like, if I could afford it easily and it wasn't really stressful, I would go for the 10. Most people who like graded cards, but that the 9, it's unless I had I would need to have multiples of money in order to feel comfortable with that. Right.
But then the chase goes away though too, right? Like if tomorrow you have $100 million, you just buy everything in the hobby, done. It gets boring.
Yeah. And it's not even, I could have a smaller collection and just have more 10s, and I probably could spend more money on the hobby and have more 10s too. But I mean, I don't know if it's, unless I'm like $100 million, I'm probably not buying 10s in the 9.
But that's the thing though. Like, say you get the $100 million tomorrow,
yeah, exactly.
Say you hit that Powerball. Do you even care? The chase is completely gone.
Yeah.
You go click buy it now on PWCC, on eBay. You own everything. Does it matter anymore?
What do you think? Would you prefer the 10s?
If I owned $100 million, if I was worth $100 million, a lot of the chase would be gone. I might not pry the PSA 10 Illustrator away from Logan, but I could own anything else with the click of a button. I could call up Scott and I could have his Illustrator, his trophies that are on eBay if there's no other active copies anywhere. I think I'd buy one of everything for a couple of $1 million, and then I'd just largely be done. I mean, it is an interesting thought, right? I mean, people fantasize all the time about winning the lottery, and I made a video on that. But it would take a lot of the like drive of life away, right? If you were just
cards, right? Life in general, right? Like you're not fighting for anything anymore. I mean, it would be great, but it's also, yeah.
But that isn't an argument of why you go with the 9s. Right? Like,
true.
That's just an argument of like, if you get too rich, is collecting even fun? I mean, that's a whole nother, any collecting at all. And what I would say is, yes, I can easily afford those 300 hollows. It wasn't a challenge to find those. I freaking love those and love those binders. Getting the 10s and being able to look at them, because I enjoy the process of collecting. It's not just about the chase or the difficulty for me. Like, for sure. There are plenty of things that I collect and enjoy filling out that are extremely common and extremely easy to find. It's not just about the money for me. Now, the chase and the money is one aspect that I enjoy, though. It's not like that. It's not that I don't also like that and appreciate it and enjoy that. But these are like my childhood cards, right? Like I have a emotional response to them, regardless of how much they're worth. That I don't think would ever go away, no matter how much money I made. I'd look at those things and I'd be like, these are really special things, like special items.
See, for me, I think 90% of it is the journey and the chase. Like when I came into the hobby, I came out guns blazing in 2014. I said, wow, Pokemon is still a thing. Phantom Forces is the newest set. It's set number 70, whatever it was. I said, I missed 50 something sets. I want to open a box of every single set that I missed. And I want to collect a PSA 9 of every chase card that I missed, because PSA 10s were crazy, even though at the time it wasn't even remotely close to what it is today. I did it. And I had all these cards that I never looked at because it was too many to look at. Maybe I don't live in a big enough house. Maybe if I had $100 million, I could just decorate every room in the mansion with different cards. But that's what it came down to at the end of the day. I had 370 cards that I almost sold all in one lot to Jake back in early 2020 because they were just sitting in boxes. Now a lot of them are sitting in the PWCC vault. I don't see them. I reached the summit, and I climbed Everest, and I don't need to just sit there and stay at the summit. I'll like moving on and get, maybe not Everest, but I climbed a very tall peak. I looked around. I enjoyed it. I moved on to the next one.
So let me ask you a tough question, Dan. Do you think that you are biased then about things being in a bubble because you are at a point in your journey where you've lost some interest that maybe a lot of other people have, like genuinely, and that if you had more of that interest or emotional interest, that would shift some of your bubble feeling, that some of your bubble is emotional and not just like rational and intellectual about like what other people value, including your graded stuff and your, everything.
Some portion of it, surely. Absolutely. Definitely my bias.
Not, I'm just.
Yeah. No, definitely my bias is important to understand. Even when I came into the hobby, even when the prices were so much lower, like I was a PSA 9 collector, that was where I saw the value. At the end of it, like I understand the power of the 10. 10 out of 10 is perfect. I think PSA has brilliant, like BGS has good marketing going on. It's not even marketing. It's just like something in our brains that like they don't even market the Black Label that heavily, I don't feel, but people just fall over each other for it. It's absolutely fascinating to watch because some of those examples, again, getting back to the accuracy, precision, repeatability, it's just not there. And I mean, I've seen Black Labels that were off center. I've seen Black Labels that had a speck of whitening, and people are still paying thousands for a $50, $100, $200 card. So yeah, my bias definitely is relevant, and people should understand it towards my argument. But I'm definitely cognizant of the fact that people like this. A lot of people like to spend money. I mean, living paycheck to paycheck is a very common thing. A lot of people just seem to have an allergy to money, and they'll just throw it at whatever brand name or label or whatever the commercial on TV tells them to throw it at.
Yeah, because I think it's important to try and separate these things, and it's not easy to separate, right? It's what are sort of your preferences? Like if I'm thinking about this from a market standpoint, right? I'm thinking, okay, what are Dan's preferences, like actual preferences? What has just come from Dan being in this hobby longer than 90% of 95%, 98% of the market right now, right? And then are Dan's preferences the norm in the market? And is that going to be what I should expect for other people? One, and then two, clearly his time in the market is not like Dan has opened one of every booster box. Dan has bought and sold millions of dollars of Pokemon. Dan is like the 1% of the 1% of the 1% in the Pokemon hobby in that sort of way, in terms of experiencing those things, right? And I think when you think about, it's very important, and this is true, that you need to invest in things that you understand, right? So if I'm Dan and I don't get it, like one of the dangers is like if you become, and I'm not saying this necessarily is where Dan's at, but like if you are not the norm, it can be easy to become detached from the market, like the market sentiment. So it can be hard to like invest and speculate in a market if you are no longer like the average person doing it, right? Because you are an outlier for various reasons. And then it becomes important to like engage and listen in those discussions and see. That being said, I think that Dan's binder sense and the anti-graded carding thing, I think, is very much a humongous part of the market and the conversation, and is way more part of a conversation in every other hobby outside of Pokemon, which shows me that there's more danger in Pokemon of a grading mania in maybe anything else outside of sports, in terms of like what these hobbies have been built on. But I do think that people like Dan and I, because of like what we've done in the hobby, we can become a little bit detached from like who are the people actually hunting these 10s right now? Like, what is that mindset? What is that feeling? What is that happiness? You know? And honestly, Dan, I think it's why you got into MetaZoo. I'm going to throw out.
Oh yeah, I never addressed the MetaZoo thing, right? I didn't dodge it
for that excitement, right? You know, it's for that chase, for that you know, doing something that brought some of that back.
And MetaZoo absolutely has some very scary, forward-looking, very optimistic, forward-looking speculation.
Yeah,
I bought a couple cards myself that, I mean, I paid. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I paid over $1,000, I believe, for a 1 of 100 Bigfoot sample card. I don't know what they've gone for since. Probably down, if I had to guess. I paid for a 1 of 100 first sighting Topps Bigfoot. My thing is Bigfoot in MetaZoo, but
yeah,
some amount of what I do, and I've mentioned this before, I'm very much playing with house money to an extent. Oh, looks like we're actually getting raided by Rusty. Shout out TCA Gaming.
There we go.
We're talking about MetaZoo as Rusty raids us.
Perfect timing.
But yeah, some amount of what I'm doing in MetaZoo is definitely very. I mean, it's all very risky. It's a young card game. I think, and I mentioned this in Discord quite recently. One thing that scares me is we can all like band together and we can point at VFriends and we can say, how crazy is that? And we can feel better about what we're in. I feel better about MetaZoo when I look at VFriends. I feel way better about Pokemon when I look at VFriends. So like, keep that context too. There's things that are more young, newer, more ridiculous, higher prices, crazier. And to me, like I've had, if you actually care for like my in-depth thoughts on MetaZoo, you can go check out my channel. I have multiple hour-long videos where I just ramble. I like the things they're doing with the foil patterns, with the wrappings. I like the fact that even though they don't have an IP that they built into the TCG, they're going off of something even bigger than an IP, any individual IP. They're going off of the public domain, which is an almost endless pool of cryptids from ancient mythology, and like everywhere, every human on Earth knows of some cryptid, some creature of their lore, whether religious or whether just urban legend or whatever it may be. Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster. I won't go on too in depth, but I really love that angle of it, and it's a fascinating case study of a few different things. The creator, Mike, clearly having the history. He can look at the history of 25 years of Pokemon, and he can take what he likes best, and looking at Magic and looking at sport cards and intermingling to optimize for his own game what he thinks is best. And I think it's fun to be a part of, honestly. It is largely why I'm there. And now that I have a partner access, I have wholesale distribution, I have ground floor access to the product, it's so much safer than when I first got into it a year ago, when it was younger and I was paying full-blown retail on eBay like everyone else. So I feel better about it now, I feel really good about buying Evolving Skies booster boxes at $80. I feel really good about buying UFO boxes at absolute ground floor cost.
I have a hard time of understanding how you feel, how you are at an 8. So tonight, for people coming in, so we're talking about, there are these two ideas. One, that we are in a cardboard super bubble right now, where that this bubble in cardboard may still pop. We're talking about the sports card market, pop culture cards, Pokemon, Marvel, Star Wars, and within sports, soccer, F1, all the major sports, et cetera, et cetera. So that's on one side, super bubble. The other side is something that like Gary V has talked about, and some other influencers have talked about, this idea that Pokemon cards and other cardboard is going to be replacing to some degree, or taking some of the market share away from like things like people putting fine art in their houses, ceramics, other things that were popular for other generations. Okay. And so Dan thinks that we're at like an 8 right now in the super bubble potentially. And I think for me, I have a little bit of a hard time because I agree with sort of your IP analysis, right? Like, and I think going after strong IPs where there's low printing makes sense in this environment right now. But that's because I'm like a 4 and I'm fairly bullish on the growth of these types of things. I want to turn it over to you, Lord Pokesmoke, because we've just been going on and on. What do you do you have a similar reaction to me? Do you feel like it makes sense to you, kind of holding both those things and feeling like, yeah,
the duality of Dan's beliefs.
Yeah. Like, what's your impression?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that it makes sense, but I also, I have graded cards, and I also dabble in MetaZoo. I have a binder of, Cryptid Nation's 2nd edition that I opened a couple boxes of, and I don't know. I'm not heavily invested in it like Dan is. I've cracked some boxes, played around. I have some of the Rudy promos. Yeah, I guess I've never really thought about the, being on one side thinking modern Pokemon is sort of overblown with Ultra Modern PSA 10 prices. I mean, I think you get that a little bit in MetaZoo too, where what I'm doing in MetaZoo is just opening it up, putting it in binders. I do think some of their over serialization, they're having a lot of different serialized cards, and then those going for high prices is kind of crazy too.
To the moon, baby.
Alien Bigfoot, let's go.
Yeah, I don't really know how to rectify those two with each other. When you did mention fine art, though, it got me thinking just quickly again, sort of on the one side, if this is like fine art, right? I mean, so every art piece is sort of a one of one. I mean, you can get prints, right? But the original is a one of one piece. I was thinking, right, someone was talking earlier about sports cards. They have 100 Trevor Lawrence one of one, or 1,000, or whatever it is. One of the things with sports that I've always thought is kind of ridiculous is that all of those one of ones look the exact same to me. I mean, it's like the same pose with the same guy and slightly different things. If Pokemon went the actual art route and started doing one of ones, but not like a refractor Charizard that was a special color, but actually the one piece of art on a card that was unique. Is that different enough from sports? Does that do something other than what's going on in sports for those one of ones? Can you make 5 different one of one Charizards? They will have super unique art on each one, and that's going to be better than, I don't know, the 1,000 one of one Trevor Lawrences, or 100 or 50 or however many there are.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this stuff, like, I think about it very, very, like, the first question I ask is like, what is the company behind anything? So for me, why I felt somewhat bullish on MetaZoo was Steve Aoki was a huge thing in terms of the money, in terms of the influence, in terms of the connections. Fanatics buying Tops and then making, and being involved and planning on spreading it to other countries and around the world, and buying these things at such a premium that it puts us an incentive on them to follow through and be successful in that, is the first thing. And then the next thing to me is sort of like the IP being really strong, because for example, like you can have like with Bigfoot, like any card company could come out with Bigfoot cards, right? It's not something that anyone can own. No one owns that specifically. And theoretically, even with like, Star Wars or Marvel or whatever, like those rights can be sold to different card companies. Like it could die from one card company and then be switched up and sold somewhere else, right? So I think the first thing for me is that company, and then the next thing for me is the size and the strength and the way that the IP connects. And for MetaZoo, and then we can certainly go on to a different topic, but for MetaZoo, I think that it had both of those things going, for it. Which is I think what other people saw, right? That potential of like, we have a very like ambitious, driven team to create something like fairly stonky, fairly like investment heavy collectible with like the serialized stuff. But also something that we hope people are going to play and engage in, that sort of thing. Plus a, a lot of money and a lot of connections to kind of make that happen. And then a very strong, if we want to call it IP around, although it really isn't an intellectual property, which is part of the danger, but part of the danger is that the intellectual property is just sort of the MetaZoo universe where these characters exist in. It's not the specific characters. And I'm certainly not at all sold on the MetaZoo universe. I'm not sure most people who are into Dan, do you know the MetaZoo universe and the stories? Right? No. Like I think a number of
they're kicking ass.
Yeah, and I think that like Mike has a plan, right, or a hope of like creating Netflix shows and right, and are people going to really like the universe, the actual IP of MetaZoo, or is it going to be more just like they like any card that has like Bigfoot and a devil on it and Santa Claus? And because to me, that's a no-brainer to have really cool looking cards of those characters, right? Like if you make the coolest looking serialized first versions of those things, that's the rookie Bigfoot. That's the rookie Santa Claus, whatever it is, if that hasn't been done before or done in sort of a cool way. But is the MetaZoo IP, is the world. And I mean, part of what's so powerful about Marvel and about Star Wars is like the world building, right? Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. People have years and years of connections to all of these worlds, Pokemon, to these worlds, to these characters, to the video games, to the stories. Not MetaZoo, right, at all. And I think similarly, like I worry a little bit about like the Zero Cool Jackass or the Zero Cool like Gary V friends, right? Now they're trying to build that. That's like the hope or the plan for some of these things, but it's obviously like that's where I run into an issue with you, Dan, right? It's sort of the double, like it's sort of like if I was very bullish, maybe I would do MetaZoo, but if I was bearish, like because MetaZoo feels like more risky to me than Marvel and Star Wars, and that where world building's already done. Like if I think like Fanatics is bigger and wealthier and definitely more rich than MetaZoo, just to make an argument, right? So I think Fanatics is much bigger, much stronger, much more money, much more incentive. And then I add like the IP and the world building's already done and connected to huge companies like Disney, for example, which has like, Marvel and Star Wars and all these things like amusement rides and amusement parks. How do you get to that? How do you get to sort of, or at the end of the day, and I'm picking on you a lot, I apologize, we can move on to a new topic, but like, it's sort of like, I just don't like any of that stuff. And I just chose MetaZoo and I'm just ride or die,
Just for maybe it provides useful context, maybe it doesn't. I've long been a strong advocate, and people who know me, know my channel, will know this. S&P 500, traditional investments, not financial advice by any means, but traditional investing, tax advantage accounts, 401ks, Roth IRAs, things like that. I bought Bitcoin several years ago. I'm not like, I didn't buy 10% of my net worth with it. I didn't buy a ton of it, but Bitcoin was intriguing to me for various reasons. Cryptocurrency was intriguing to me for various reasons. So I took a shot with it. It played out really, really well. I've done really well with it. I've made 6 figures from it, not 7, not 8, 9, 10, like some people, but maybe not 10, but I've done well with it, and it was fun. My interactions with it still are, it's highly speculative. It's highly risky, but it's fun and it's innovative and I like it. I like certain things about it just inherently. I dislike certain things about banking, modern banking, which led me towards liking certain things about crypto. There's certain things I dislike about Pokemon. There's certain things I wish they did better. There's certain things that Medizu does better. Having the 25 years of hindsight, having the history of Pokemon to look at and then fix it. So that's part of the reason that I'm interacting the way that I am. I like Bigfoot. It's a silly thing. Like, to me, I can do business in it. I can have fun with it. I can make some money in it. The amount of money that I've invested in it at this point in my life, given the greater context of my financial picture and all that, which I won't delve too deeply into, but I'm very comfortable with the amount of money that I've put in, with the higher risk than it is. More risky than my Pokemon, surely. But yeah, all that said, all that context, that whole broad picture, that's why I'm in it and where I'm at with it. I haven't gotten to Dragon Ball because I didn't have that connection. I haven't gotten into Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, any of these other things that are more proven, more historic. They've been around for a while relative to Medizu. Like, Medizu was new to me, which just like fit in better because I didn't have any connection to anything else. If any of that makes sense. Like, that's just my mindset, where I'm at, why I'm in it. And I would caution the same way. Anyone thinking about getting into Medizu. If you're doing it as a consumer with a fixed budget, 100 a month, 10,000 a month, $10 a month, wherever you're at, if you're doing it, consuming it as a true collector, no intent to sell, no care for a price going up over time, have fun with it. If you're doing it as an investor, I would heavily caution you. Same way I would more so than I would heavily caution a Pokemon investor.
How about Marvel or Star Wars?
I haven't even watched all the Star Wars movies. I think I've watched part of one, so I just don't care, don't know about it. Marvel, I mean, I've watched some of the Marvel movies, but they're really not my thing. I just, like, Pokemon was my thing.
No, but I'm not. But again, that gets into like the personal, right? Like what we like and what we don't like. We're talking,
what's more speculative? What's less speculative?
Yeah, and again, I know you may not know enough about those markets to really understand that, but
and that would be my answer.
Yeah, but like again, I think it comes back to, like, because I am a consumer of Medizu. I buy every product and open it because I really like Medizu, right? But I'm very clear that I'm a consumer in my, like, it's zero. Like, I don't think it makes sense to speculate on it. I think it makes sense to, like, enjoy it and have fun. And I'm a 4 tonight.
Yeah.
That was sort of where, right? Because, like, I am very bullish on these new IPs and that there could be more room and these types of things. And yet I still feel like there's so many things in the line in front, and for me, like, if Mike is successful in creating an actual brand that I start to see kids like reading Medizu books and, like, in the lore and the magic of Medizu, I will completely have a different take.
Yeah,
so it's just that, yeah.
For context too, I'm an 8 broadly. On VHSs, I'm a 9.5. On VFriends, I'm a 29. on Pokemon, I'm a 6. On modern Pokemon, I'm a 7.5. On the good Pokemon, I'm a 4. Like, it's all over the place, and they all Medizu, I'm a 8.5. Medizu, like, that's where I'm at. Like, that was quick off the cuff. If you ask me to state those again, the numbers would slightly vary, but, like, they all average out to an 8 is where I'm at.
Yeah, so if anyone else wants to come on, feel free. Mason can put that in the chat again. Otherwise, we'll just chill and hang out. So, Laura Pogesmoke, what do you think? Anything to add to the conversation? Anything else on your mind? What's going on for you?
I don't know. I want Dan to run back through those numbers again, see how close he can get, see how right on he is.
I think I was a 29 on VFriends. I would actually revise that to an 85.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, please.
Oh no, I don't know. I mean, I dabble in basically all of the markets that you've just rattled off, but I'm also, I'm very much a consumer in them, right? I mean, I have very small amounts in everything but Pokemon, basically. Actually, I just got a nice Han Solo in here today, but it's it's like a little cheap. I think it's like a 1 of 50 parallel, right? It's interesting stuff, fun to go around. I like having cardboard be all around my little office area, but I'm also realizing that I have this nice white background all night. Y'all are really beating me with your backgrounds. But yeah, I'm definitely mostly a consumer with all of this stuff. I obviously follow markets because I generally like markets, and that's what I do in my day job. And I want to buy things that I think aren't gonna. I want to buy something today that I can't buy two of for the same price in 6 months. But other than that, this is way more fun than it is any sort of I need these to move in any direction to be financially sound or anything like that. So, yeah, I guess that's my view on it.
Yeah, I think definitely for myself, it's if it can all line up, it's great. But there are plenty of things that I buy that I just enjoy. That I don't think there's any market reason why that's going to stock, and I buy them because it's fun and I enjoy having that. But and then there are things that there's nothing that I buy just because I think it's going to stock at all. But then there are things that I buy that I think, may stonk or I think have that sort of speculative upside. And I happen to really like. So.
And me, with where I'm at with Pokemon, like Pokemon for me today, it's my business, but still my business inventory factors towards my net worth. I have an uncomfortable percentage of my net worth tied up in Pokemon. Some of it I feel better about. Some of it I feel better about long term, and I've turned down very high offers on some of my better cards. So I believe in certain things longer term, speculating on their future value, staying flat, going up, whatever the case may be. But there's a decent portion that I don't believe in as much, and what I'm actively selling is more likely to be the things that I want to move through. That when the cards are selling raw mint, and this is the bottom 90% of stuff, this is the bottom 99% of stuff. When the raw mint cards are selling for $1 to $10, and the graded examples are selling for 100, 1,000, whatever, that's just where it's really, really scary. And my how I sleep at night, because some people would say, well, how do you sleep at night? Why do you do that to people? Why do you sell things you don't believe in that you think are going to go down? I'm always the cheapest on the market. So part of me is like, when someone was selling the $1,000 EVs, I was selling them for 900. I was selling them for 950. So I was, and I said they were too much when they were 250, and they're almost 250 today still, after peaking at 1,000 and then coming down. So again, I definitely could be wrong in a lot of this.
So if no one else wants to jump in, what I would like to do, let's do about 10 to 15 minutes of questions. If you guys are up for it, just to kind of end out the stream. That could end up being 30 minutes, obviously, or an hour if there are tons of questions. It will not be an hour. I need to get some sleep. And we're already fairly late, but let's, if both of you guys are cool with that, why don't we do, 15 to 20 minutes of questions. If we happen to find stuff that we want to talk about a little longer, we can go a little bit. Sound good?
Sure. If 1 out of 10 was trusting Jake's time, and 10 out of 10 was saying that 15 minutes is going to be 90, I'm an 8 out of 10.
I think I'm a 15.
Okay, let's start. Let's see. All right, so this is a topic more, but it's basically a question. Jake, let's do this side of the argument. Why would I want modern cards with no history with created rarity for super high prices?
One thing immediately comes to my mind when people say artificial rarity. It's not artificial. When they stamp 1 out of 1 on a card and they stamp 1 out of 100, it's real. Like if they're really only producing one, that's real rarity.
It's a poor way of saying it versus created rarity or manufactured rarity.
Contrived.
Would be intentional or intentional rarity, whatever. Yeah.
I think contrived captures it really well. So contrived rarity.
Contrived almost feels like it has a negative connotation to me.
It
Where
does.
but if you say, but people may not feel that way. Like that's definitely probably how Max feels. But other people might feel it's not contrived, it's intentional, it's created, and I'm okay with that. I like that. You know what I mean? Versus I don't like that. Maybe it feels contrived to them. It's more like an emotion that they put on it. I think for them, they're not trying to contrive rarity. They're trying to create rarity. I don't know, whatever. But go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, that's really nitpicking semantics, but I stand by the use of contrived. But yeah, contrived rarity is true rarity. So if they print a new Charizard next year, 1 of 10, that card is many orders of magnitude rarer than the base set first edition Charizard. No matter how much people don't like it, that card is instantly going to transact in the vicinity, in the ballpark of the base set first edition Charizard. That's just the way that it is. I wouldn't want to touch it. I would love to open a product and pull one and immediately sell it because that's just crazy to me. But that goes to my 8 out of 10 ranking of the whole super bubble thing. I don't think serialized Pokemon is an if. I think it's a when. Could be, and again, like, it could be 50 years from now. We're 25 years in. It could be 50 years. But I see another lull as an inevitability, and I see serialization as a quick fix.
So inserts are contrived rarity. Why does it need to be serialized for it to be contrived rarity? Alt arts have everything has a contrived or an intentional rarity, including WotC hollows, including gold stars, including all these things that people enjoy. So why when it becomes more rare, like why do you draw the line on it? To me, it actually makes no sense at all. Now, why you draw the line, like to me, the serialized actually adds something positive because it makes you more confident with how many exist. It makes you understand what you're buying and what you're owning a little more. I think the negative of serialized is it's going to be so freaking expensive. No one's going to be able to afford it, and it might ruin the product for so many people. But the negative to me isn't that, like, why would you want it? But that's different than what Max is asking. That's one part. The other parts are the modern with no history that I think I'm much more in agreement with. I'm very much in agreement with Max on.
Yeah, I think there is sort of a contrived rarity where, like, I don't know, contrived rarity. We're printing a 1 of 10 Charizard, right? But I think there are extremely rare cards in this hobby that are a lot less contrived in their production, like the number 1, number 2, number 3 trainers, where those are extremely rare and they're made to be extremely rare, but they are for a purpose. They're for someone winning. You know, it makes sense that there's only one of them, or I have a handful of the Art Academy cards. I love going after those. I love looking for those super rare, trying to track down the winners, buy them from them. It doesn't feel like they were printed at 1 of 100 they weren't printed at 1 of 100 to sell booster boxes, right? They were printed at 1 of 100 for whatever reason, but they weren't inserted in as hits to sell booster boxes. So I think maybe that's what people mean a little bit when they do sort of this, created rarity is the question asked versus more natural rarity. I mean, it's all the same sort of thing, but
trophy cards are exactly what I was going to go to. So I pulled up the dictionary definition of contrived. Deliberately created rather than arising naturally or spontaneously. So I think, like, at the summit, at the pinnacle of, or I guess maybe at the bottom, like least contrived, whatever way you want to look at it, would be trophy cards. This was an event that someone won, best in the world, commemorated by a trophy card, 1 of 6 created, 3 divisions, TCG, video game. So, like, the number 1 Pikachu awarded each year. That is the pinnacle of, like, the least contrived thing. That arrives so naturally because you're not going to give out a number 1 trophy card to more people that won the tournament. The Art Academies, you could argue, Pokemon could have made those a 1 of 1 and given 1 to each artist, but they probably knew in their minds, let's give them 100 so that they can trade with the other winners, so that some can transact on the open market, so that some prices can kind of go up. Like they know what was going on when they submitted a bundle of 100 to every winner. Let's reward them with more without giving them money directly. Let's indirectly give them 100 copies so that they can make some extra money with it. So that would be a little bit more contrived, the Art Academy, but still way less contrived than a 1 of 10 Charizard that comes out next year or 20 years from now.
I think to me, a really good example would be like an Action Comics #1 that was never made to be rare. So if it's intentionally not made to be rare, but it was intended to be like just printed to demand. So, this item's not supposed to be valuable. It's supposed to be 5 cents. Everyone, it's just to popularize this character basically and sell comics, right? Whereas we're in an era now where, and Pokemon's always been in this since the beginning, where there was a systematic rarity where some cards are more difficult to pull than others. And that was intentional to tell us which one should be valuable, right? And which ones we should want to some degree, right? Now there's a combination. They also put like the evolved forms, things that more naturally, like people would probably want the strong one to add anything. Why should modern cards with no history, with created rarity for super high price? And what I would say is that completely agree, but a lot of these cards in these hobbies, like the history is the character, is the IP, is the world. And so although the card specifically and the card design is sort of a brand new thing, the character people have a connection to. So if you throw out like a really cool Marvel character that people have a long connection to with great art, like people are going to want that. Now, I do think it hits differently than like Pokemon base set that they collected as a kid. But I'm not sure it should have, I'm not sure to the point where it's like, there's no value, or it's sort of like, it's very easy for me to wrap my head around of like why I would want my favorite characters from my favorite IPs in aesthetically pleasing card art, that type of thing.
I think the main reason people would want it is just the exclusivity. And that's where, again, this is something that pulls me up towards the 8 out of 10 on the whole conversation of the night. The Logo Man, the triple Logo Man that came up, everyone was pumping. Everyone was pumping it hard. The market didn't buy into it as deeply as Ken Golden and everyone else hoped and thought they would. But yeah, I mean, the sole intent of that card is just social media-esque, bragging rights, whatever you want to call it. It's, to me, that's probably a pretty cynical take on it, but that's largely what the whole idea of buying a 1 of 10 Charizard would be today. Buying a 1 of 1 triple Logo Man, of which they're going to create another one 10 years from now, probably.
Yeah, I was going to say I wouldn't, but then I literally just talked about the Art Academy, and those are probably the most expensive cards that I've ever paid for. So maybe a little bit of me saying I wouldn't is because, like, I don't really get it for sports cards. I don't think I collect some sports cards, but I don't think they look that good. Like, it's all sort of the same template. Maybe if it's a super cool 1 of 1, 1 of 10 art that is amazing, it's Mewtwo riding Charizard, fighting Blastoise riding Venusaur or something. Who knows? But maybe then I'd actually really want it. So I don't know how to rectify those two things, just like I can't rectify Dan's love of Metazu and hate of Slab. So
okay, it looks like Daniel, you want to come on for a sec here? Yeah. Okay. All right. What's up, man? How's it going?
How are you guys doing?
Good.
Good. Did you want to add something to the discussion?
Just like, so the question, like, because I guess like the big thing is like alt arts, and like, is there going to be a moment where the aggression on people buying it stops, and there's still just enough to satiate the people collecting it? but they are pretty rare. Like, and like that's a question like I've been asking like with like the mid generations, how like there's they're the first and unlimited edition. First edition and unlimited. They're both really rare, but the first edition is a little bit less rare. Limited is more rare. Or yeah. So are people going to care more about a first edition print or like just the more rare edition that just doesn't have a print? Like what? And collectors seem to like rarity more.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if that will be enough for like these modern chase cards.
So sorry.
Like,
So you're
well,
talking about like
yeah.
Japanese first edition versus unlimited, like
Yeah.
middle generation EX. Yeah, easier to
Yeah.
see. For people who don't know, right, that the unlimited versions in a number of these sets was actually rarer than the first edition one. So you have sort of first edition, just as Dana said, first edition versus rarity. Which one are people going to like? Yeah. So what was your So what is your feeling about the alt arts, or how do you feel like do you feel like these things are are rare enough, are something that you feel like connect enough with people that just because it's modern or it's a new art, do you think that means that people can't connect with it and won't want these long term? What's your view?
Yeah, I think just because it's modern doesn't mean it can't be worth anything. But maybe like with everything going on with grading and how expensive it can be, I still think it's expensive to grade, and there's just still a lot of media with that, and there's still a lot of cards to be graded. So, who knows how many of these? I don't think there's probably a lot of people with like a few, but I don't know if there's like one person with like a lot of like modern altar. Like I think they're cool enough that people want, but maybe like the raw prices are going up, and I feel like eventually the graded prices would be similar to the raw. Like I just don't like, but maybe they are rare enough. I just think the graded prices are really high, especially moving beyond. Or like I feel like there's some odd things that go on with like, the champ or like what is yeah. I think that might be like some like sports people, because I've been around like sports guys that like would buy stuff and like, try to look for stuff. Like I had a buddy that would ask me, "Oh, he would ask me about like battle styles. Like, is this a good like Tyranitar? Like, those types of people that like these are the people that like buy the Charizard as soon as it comes out, grades it and sells it for 1,000. Right? They're selling it to like whoever wants to buy it for that price. And I think it's the high prices are probably sustaining because PSA is so expensive to send in cards. Like those,
Say
like
that last piece again. The high prices are standing for what reason?
since PSA is still expensive to send in these cards. Before you could do it for a lot cheaper, but now it's a little bit more difficult. Maybe not as worth it.
I think that's definitely an important dynamic is sort of trying to figure out what's in people's grading piles and what people haven't sent out because it's been too expensive. And, of course, I think a number of alt arts will fit that bill. Why don't we, just to finish up, do you guys want to give your opinions on alt arts or share sort of where you're at with them as a collector, speculator, wherever, and then we'll maybe close it down for tonight.
I love them. I don't buy any of them graded, and I don't grade any of them, but raw, great, fantastic. Art is 10 out of 10 on like all of them. How many were printed? I have no idea. Probably a lot. I would not be paying a lot of money for any of them graded, and I haven't been. But yeah, just for the arts on the card, they're really good. I'm a birds collector, and so the three Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres are brilliant from Chilling Reign, and
yeah, I think the alt arts are definitely being buoyed by the fact that they can't be submitted cheaply or quickly. So right now, the Umbreon Altar, the Moonbreon, 1,438 PSA 10s, and that's of 1,700 total graded. So the 10 rate is significantly high. And we're talking about cards that have only been submitted at the $50 tier or higher. We haven't seen the $30 tier yet. We haven't seen the $18 tier yet come back. So I think it's a weird dynamic because currently the PSA 10 is about $640 per Pokédata, and the raw price is about $310. The PSA 10 price is being held up by the fact that they're not coming back, or they're not even being submitted as much as they want to be because the grading is so expensive and the turnaround time is so long. And that's propping up the raw price too, to an extent, I think, because people are buying the raw ones, some amount of them. I mean, some amount of people are buying them. I agree. Alt arts are beautiful cards, but there's definitely the 10 is going for too much, and I think the raw one might be going for too much because the 10 is going for too much. It's this really weird dynamic. And over the next 2 to 5 years, we're really going to see, I think, a lot of downward pressure in prices of cards like this. I don't own many alt arts, maybe a couple that I pulled myself, maybe one or two. I haven't been opening much product recently because I think a lot of the prices are just too high out of the gate. I've just been flipping into the market largely. And yeah, the PSA 10s, like Lord Pokesmoke said, I'm not touching them graded. I'm not grading them either. So that's where I'm at. Revisit them, fill out my binders in a couple of years for a lot cheaper than today is my estimate.
That's my estimate too. And I'm willing to pay more if I'm wrong. Like, because I will definitely make a binder of them because I really enjoy them. So if there are enough people doing what I'm doing, they may end up going up in price or not coming down, right? If there are enough people who have that sort of attitude. I just don't think that's the dynamic. I think the vast majority of collectors want things sort of immediately right away, while it's still hot and people are still opening a lot of it. So I just think, yeah, a lot more is going to be opened, and people are going to, as soon as the next era and the next generation, there's going to be a lot more cool things that people are going to move on to. And that'll be the time when I try to purchase those at a little bit of a discount, basically. All right. Thank you all so much for hanging out. Appreciate you all. I apologize if I'm like ending the stream a little bit early. I'm just very exhausted.
It's funny to say that almost 2.5 hours in, because like for us it feels short, but like anywhere else on YouTube, anywhere else, this is like gone on far too long, which is funny.
I probably will make another video this week. Not sure. Then I'll be on vacation, so probably won't be doing lives while I'm on vacation for a little. But really appreciate you, Daniel and Lord Pokesmoke, hanging out with us and coming on, and every other guest that came on tonight. Really appreciate all of you and everyone just like hanging out in the chat. You know, thanks so much. Any channels or anything you guys want me to promote? Any thing that people should go check out?
I have an Instagram, same as the name. Where can I point to it here?
Lord Pokesmoke, follow on Instagram. How about you, Daniel?
I got nothing. I don't know if like I had like one question. I don't know if anyone had thoughts on the Scarlet Violet EX aspect. Like, seems like it's kind of like reminiscent of the old thing, and with Terra being similar to like Delta species, I wonder if they'll revisit stuff like that.
Any last second thoughts on sort of the new EX cards, going back into that?
I'm interested to see if we not only get the new EX, but we get a new Gold Star.
Yeah, it'll probably be cool. I would have liked another new name like GX or V, because I think there's a lot of VXs. Like you could say YouTube EX, and I think there's one in every generation besides Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield. But it'll probably be cool. So I don't really care too much.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have too strong of opinions yet. People seem to be pretty excited though, most people, which is cool. And yeah, but I think the Gold Star point, yeah, I mean, I'm a huge, like, that'd be sick, obviously, if there were just more of that. But yeah, then it also just gets so confusing, just as Lord Pokey Smoke said, of like, what are we even talking about? And like, like original Nintendo EX era versus like 4 different EX eras. But anyway, everyone have a good night. Appreciate you guys, and everyone have a good night in the chat. All right, we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks all.
Peace. Have a good one.